light shone on the concrete, creating an eerie light that was extremely pleasing to the eye. It used to be one of the things I took for granted, but now, when I seem to have nothing, it is one of the highlights of my life. It is amazing.
I continued walking down the concrete sidewalk, going past streetlights, old hookers, and drunken bums. The people that I would consider my people. Because just like them, I have a loving caregiver that rids me of my horrors of life, giving me comfort as I rest against her bosom, as she holds me close. That caregiver is the Satan syrup that I love so much. The syrup that rests in the old broken down building across the street.
The walk to the building was brief. It was a walk that I take many times, as I move past the dim streetlights that provide barely enough light to construct the tiniest shadow in the concrete. But I don't need light. In fact, I can see fine without it. The reason behind it is unknown. I finally reached the front of the building, and I looked up to see the flashing dim lights that read, "The Hawk's Den." I looked back down at the creaky glass door, and I pulled it open, and I walked inside.
The bar looked just like the usual scene you'll see at this time of day. It was the place where the undesirables looked for a way to escape their lives. The undesirables who were just like me. I took a quick glance of the room and I saw the bartender, a small man dressed in a black shirt and jeans.
He occupied himself by cleaning off several old dishes. I slowly sat down in front of the counter. Two other people sat down by me, a man and a woman. The man was larger than life, and he was dressed in a suit. He spoke to the woman, as I watched the motions of his chin and his large black beard.
It was obvious that the woman didn't want to be there. She was dressed like a whore. She only wore a black leotard with a jacket over it, and fishnet leggings that were the same color. She looked away from the man as much as she could, but it was so obvious that the man was not going to be giving up. I could hear him whispering to her, telling her to come with him. She continued to ignore him. The man glanced at me, and I looked away.
The bartender said, "What would you like?"
"Tequila," I answered. The bartender grabbed a bottle of tequila, and he poured it into a stained shot glass. I watched the mesmerizing light brown liquid spill into the glass until it was full. I thanked the bartender, and he nodded, and continued to work, ignoring the man and woman as much as he could. The man grew more impatient, and his pestering grew louder. I sat there ignoring him. I am here for what I wanted. I drank the shot of tequila, and I enjoyed the smooth taste. As I finished the shot, the man grabbed the woman by the wrist and he pulled her out of the stool. Her struggle could be heard clearly.
The bartender only took a short glance at them, and then he went back to his own business. I followed his glance, and I watched as the man pulled the woman out of the door, but I remained seated. I looked back at the bartender, and he spoke.
"This happens every night. It makes me sick." His voice repeated several times in my head, and I thought for a moment, closed my eyes, and I heard the cries of the woman that the bartender ignored. I shook my head, and I stood up. The bartender looked at me as I placed a lump of cash on the table.
"Get me a bottle of Jack."
The bartender nodded, and he handed me a full bottle of Jack Daniels. I turned and left through the creaky door. And I followed the cries of the woman as I walked through the dim concrete slums where the bad men rule, stepping on the cracked concrete and hearing the glass from used needles being crushed by my black boots. The cries grew louder, and I can hear the grunts of the man. I paused for a moment, and I pulled something out of my backpack. It was a horrific white mask that was adorned with stitches and a black smile. I felt the bumps of the details, and I put it on.
I walked to where the cries originated. A dark alley that was almost pitch black. I kept walking until I saw them. The woman was sitting on the floor, twitching slightly. Her face was soaked with her own tears. Her face was bleeding from her lips and nose. The man stood over her, shouting,
"Get up, you lazy bitch."
The man kicked her, and the woman started to cry louder. As she huddled herself against the wall, I walked into the alley as I dragged the bottle of Jack Daniels against the concrete wall, enjoying the rough scratching sound that came from it. The man turned and looked at me. The terror on his face was one of the most enjoying things I've ever seen. The man gulped as he pulled out a black pistol with his twitching hands. He leveled the gun out.
"Do you want to die? Can't you see that we're busy here?"
he screamed. The woman cried out for help, and the man kicked her to silence her. He looked back at me. I tilted my head and started walking towards him as I gripped the bottle tightly in my hands. The man moved backwards slightly, and he pulled the trigger.
The gun fired, creating a loud noise that echoed through the alley, a noise that meant the death of men. But it wasn't the death of me. I moved to the side, dodging the bullet, and I ran towards the man like a blur. His eyes opened widely, and he fired several more shots. Until I hit his arm with the bottle. I heard a cracking sound, and the man dropped the gun. The man moved backwards, holding his destroyed arm. I kicked him down against the concrete wall and stared at him. The man begged me to let him live, as he offered me money and all the other things that I didn't want.
I brought the bottle down on his other arm, and he cried out as tears fell down his face. I stomped on his left leg, creating the bones crack under my feet. His cries grew louder. I enjoyed them. It made this so much better. I stomped on his other leg, breaking it like all three of his other limbs. And then I spoke at the man. He looked back at me. His brown eyes were wide as he muttered, "Spare me," repeatedly. I ignored him. I raised the bottle and I hit him across the face. I felt his jaw break and I saw blood splatter onto the floor. I could hear the crying of the woman in the background. I ignored her. I brought the bottle down on the man's face repeatedly, feeling his skull get smashed. I kept doing it.
Again and again and again, I could hear the woman. I could hear her cries lessen as I continued to crush the man's skull. I heard her cries stop until they were replaced with mad laughter that filled the alley. I looked at her, and I saw her overly joyful blood-stained face, and I turned and left, leaving the man I had just killed on the concrete. I ventured back into the moonlight. As I took off my mask, I moved back to the place where the undesirables belong. I moved back to the place where I belong.
Hey Truly Horrific community. We've been busy lately with schoolwork, so we apologize for not posting more videos.
We are both in university and we are struggling with the amount of schoolwork we have. We will try our best to keep posting high quality videos.
We have received many suggestions to purchase a better microphone, so we have just recently started a Patreon campaign. The link is down in the description if you are interested.
Thank you for being a part of this community. Any amount is sufficient to reach our goal, and thank you once again.